You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
But I also want to appeal to those who commit hateful and criminal acts. You will answer for your actions. This is not who we are here in Montreal. We will not accept it. Every violent and hateful event will be investigated by the SPVM, which spares no efforts to keep our metropolis safe.
That is our Mayor, Valérie Plante, speaking at a press conference earlier today. So we check in now with Jim MENNIE of the Montreal Gazette. So Jim, earlier I also heard the press conference with the CJA, and they specifically said that the SPVM is actually doing a very good job of making them feel safe. But you asked the question, is it time for extraordinary measures to diffuse tensions? What kind of extraordinary measures?
I asked them, the question in the context, I think this morning during the press conference with Messieurs Legault and Trudeau. Somebody said, well, listen, is it time to sort of put a ban
the protests
on demonstration? And I believe it was Monsieur Legault who replied, well, we're looking at everything. But the fact is, well, no, we're not looking at everything. And you have to understand what's happening here, what's happened in the past, week is, on the one hand, outside of the norm, and then unfortunately very inside of the norm. I heard you talking to Carmi Levy earlier and saying that you got a bit choked up at the start of the show, just even talking about the fact shots had been fired at these two schools. The fact is, and it's a matter of record, is that shots get fired every night, virtually every night in Montreal. They hit buildings, they hit businesses, sometimes they hit people. Gunfire violence is nothing new in Montreal, but I think Carmi put his finger on it when he said that it's personal. This is not some abstract, it's not organized crime. This is something that for a lot of our listeners, on both sides of that divide, whether our listeners are of Jewish origin, whether they are of Arab origin, there's a piece of them, whether they like it or not, that's involved in this particular dispute. And the only thing that I would be concerned about, and the only thing that I really hope for, is that we don't lose sight of where we are. It's great to hear Legault and Trudeau say it's terrible, we condemn this, this isn't who we are. But one of the reasons this isn't who we are is that we have a lot of rules and regulations that, of all the stuff that we've been talking about for this past week, whether it's firebombing, whether it's assault, we already have rules on this, and we enforce them. And I got to tell you, I can absolutely assure you, having covered the Montreal Police Department on and off for the past 4 decades, as a homicide detective once told me, all murders are important, but some are more important than others. Well, in this case, this particular incident, you can bet the cops will move heaven and earth to find out who's ever responsible for these latest shootings and bring them to justice. But I think what's important, not for those who are firmly camped on either side of what's happening in Gaza and Israel, but those who are looking and saying, what the hell is going on here? What's happening in my town? Is that, yes, there's stuff going on. It's out of the ordinary. It's violent. It's frightening. But you're not in a place where this stuff goes unchecked. And believe me, I may sound naive, but I'm not being naive when I tell you that for any of these incidents, which some people may argue are, the manifestations of a dispute that's being, imported here from the far side of the world. Well, yeah, that may well be the case, but this is something that we are equipped to deal with in this country. This is something that is, we don't have to remind ourselves where we are or are things going south. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of anger, and you will see some violence. But I think in the end, as is the case in many of these circumstances, it's a fraction of a tiny slice of people involved in this who are in fact doing all the mischief, who are in fact causing all the pain and all the concern. So I would really urge our listeners, yes, on the one hand, prepare yourself, I guess, for more incidents. Prepare yourself for more complaints. Prepare yourself for very justified questions as to why exactly there has been this spike in anti-Semitic events and what can be done, not just to deal with it, but to prevent it. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, you also have to tell yourself that, we're seeing the echo of a horror that's been unfolding in the Middle East since October 7th. But on the other hand, we're in a place where, things are, how can I put it, we're focusing on a very small part of the canvas. And I'd say the much larger picture is that we are equipped to deal with this. So as heartbreaking as it may be to see in the short term, I take some solace from the fact that no matter what the ideology may be behind any particular incident, we have laws in this country that we do enforce, and we enforce them fairly. And you just can't turn around and say, well, things are spinning wildly out of control. I would respectfully submit, and I'm not trying to belittle what's been happening in the past few days, but things are no more out of control today than they were, 6 weeks ago. The only difference is it's a different topic, it's a different dispute. And quite frankly, I would suspect a lot of people at Concordia, a lot of people who are just listening to us right now, who may have been very dead set in their ways, are perhaps thinking, well, maybe, we're not looking at a massive wave here so much as we are sparks that are occurring and that are being deliberately set by a rather small set of arsonists. And I think once that is put into context, you can look at what's going to happen down the road and say, okay, it's unfortunate that it's happening here, but as I say, in this country, we know how to deal with these issues, and I'd like to think that we will.
I have to tell you, I just listened there and felt myself take a deep breath, Jim. I found that to be very reassuring. I think we all kind of needed that reminder, right? That yes, there are going to be incidents like this, but we actually are equipped. Now, that said, if Legault does decide to ban protests, my impression would be that would just stir things up even more. They would just be illegal protests then.
Well, it also poses an interesting question, especially if we're talking about pro-Palestine protests. Mm-hmm. Because I can remember back in, not that long ago, 11 years ago, 2012 at the Maple Spring, there were marches every night. And guess what? Not every night, but on a few of those nights, a fair amount of damage was done, not by the students themselves, but by people, and I think in this case as well, who had attached themselves to this movement and used it as a cover for them to do things that the vast majority of those involved wouldn't think of doing. And yet there was no move ever. There was a move, I think, to have not people have a face covering. But apart from that, nobody turned around and said, no demos. And quite frankly, I would be infinitely more concerned if the government turned around and banned demonstrations. Because let's face it, if you turn around and focus on one particular kind of demonstration, you would be laughed out of court. But the idea that, and it's happened before, but if our rights once again get bent out of shape, because at the moment people are angry, because at the moment people may be frightened, that to me is far more concerning a possibility than anything that's happened thus far.
Listen, Jim, I'm out of time because I've got an interview that I really want to get to, but I want you to know that there's some texts coming in. People are not happy with what you said. They're saying it's not reassuring. I'm afraid to go to synagogue. Someone's saying, it's easy for you to say that, Jim, you're not the target, and finding that you're being dismissive, which I know is not your intention. So I'd just give you...
I'm not being dismissive, but on the other hand, when the chief of police tells you that, you don't hide being Jewish. You shouldn't be frightened to be Jewish. If you are, then guess what? The people who pulled the trigger overnight are laughing themselves because they have done their job. If the people who threw those Molotovs out in Dollard a couple of nights ago, then it's mission accomplished. If you're frightened to go to temple, okay, they have succeeded. So really, that's all I can say.
Thank you, Jim. It's always a pleasure.
Adamant.